The How to Train Your Dragon series is fascinating. On one end, you have the original How to Train Your Dragon, which is one of the most beautiful, incredible, and most amazing animated movies ever created. On the other end is The Hidden World, which is pretty predictable and by the numbers, but ends the series well. Sandwiched between them is How to Train Your Dragon 2, one of the most conflicting movies ever. Parts are just as good as the original masterpiece, but other parts drag down the series as a whole. It's a maddening mixture of incredible and mediocre, and stands to this day as one of DreamWorks' strangest films. Let's start with why the original was so great. How to Train Your Dragon is still one of my favorite movies ever. The characters, the dragons, the music, everything about it is better than it has any right to be, and it's the kind of masterpiece every animated studio hopes to create one day. There was no doubt that it would get a sequel. And it did. I remember seeing How to Train Your Dragon 2 in theaters as just a wee strip of meat, and I quite enjoyed it. But parts of it felt off. Parts didn't work very well. So today, let me go over what did and didn't work from How to Train Your Dragon 2. The opener is still amazing. Hiccup's narration about Burk always helps to open a movie well, but the dragon racing showcases a lot in a small amount of time. All of the characters have grown older, and Burk has changed too, becoming a haven for dragons everywhere. It all feels like a natural expansion for the characters and world from the first movie. Then you reach Hiccup and Toothless flying around in what could be one of the best scenes of the whole movie. Where No One Goes is such an iconic song, and while I'm not the biggest fan of the voices or how it's sung, the fact that they blended pop and the normal soundtrack together, and it works, is astounding. And it fits so well. The scene highlights Hiccup and Toothless's dynamic expertly. Hiccup's inventions have also improved, and showing the audience his flight tech, Toothless's humor, and the incredibly well-animated backdrops to a killer soundtrack just blends together into exactly what How to Train Your Dragon should be. Next is the mapping/talking to Astrid scene, which again, shows how these characters have grown so much since the original. Hiccup's lust for knowledge has led him to mapping out the sea around Burk, and his dedication to that puts him at odds with his dad's wishes for him to become chief. The scene also establishes the main arc for Hiccup. He has to learn how to take his leadership skills to the next level and lead his tribe, even though he doesn't want to. And again, the character dynamics are incredible. Astrid and Hiccup have such natural chemistry. Toothless and Stormfly jumping around in the background adds even more humor to an already great scene. I think the greatest strength of the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy is how well it handles the characters aging. Most animated sequels or trilogies keep the characters a similar feeling or similar looking age, but Dragons 1, 2, and 3 all showcase different versions of Hiccup and his gang. It's very rare to have animated characters that grow up alongside you, and this film, just like the other two, handles that job perfectly. Hiccup, Astrid, and the others all feel like older, more experienced, and wiser versions of themselves, even if they still have some growing to do. So what's bad about this movie then? I hear you asking. All you've done is praise this movie, so what's so conflicting about it? Well, guess what, my friend? We've arrived at the turning point where I think this movie goes downhill and never quite recovers. After seeing some smoke in the distance, Hiccup and Astrid head over to check it out and discover a base destroyed by ice and a small band of dragon trappers. This scene is important because it's the first time a fully new concept has entered the movie. Everything up to this point is something you could have guessed would happen based on the characters and situations from the first movie. Dragon games? Yeah. Hiccup exploring? Totally. Burk becoming a dragon utopia? Definitely. The dragon trappers and ice are two totally new concepts that weren't explored in the first movie, and so the audience has this sense of unease and anticipation, waiting to see how this new idea fits within the construct people already understand. The problem is that I don't think they fit well, which is what sends this movie into its downward spiral. New concepts and sequels can work well. Heck, that's what sequels are built on. Al from Toy Story 2 and Lotso from Toy Story 3 are both characters and concepts you wouldn't have thought of from the first movie, but they both help to flesh out the Toy Story universe because they fit the tone. The Dragon Trappers, on the other hand, don't fit the How to Train Your Dragon tone very well. First off, character design. None of the trappers look much like the How to Train Your Dragon humans we're used to. Heck, they remind me more of the Croods than anything from the Dragons universe. The mushy chins, the lack of beards, and the general demeanor makes these characters feel like they don't belong. Secondly, and this is a huge issue with the entire movie, the lighting completely changes. How to Train Your Dragon 1 is full of warm color tones that help the universe feel bright and imaginative. The intro to number 2 matches those colors, but this scene is the first to utilize a cooler lighting tone. Lighting plays a huge role in filmmaking. Warm colors are often attributed to comfort and familiarity, and cold colors usually coincide with unnatural or unwelcoming environments. Pretty much everything from here on out uses cool lighting instead of warm lighting, and I think it affects the mood and tone of this film drastically. The ice tones are also massively boring compared to the greens and blues of the first movie, and the ice is basically used non-stop from now until the end. And finally, humans just aren't very interesting antagonists when compared to dragons. The main villain of the first film is actually Stoick, Hiccup's dad, who won't listen to his son and therefore acts as the antagonist of the movie. It's a personal dynamic, and Stoick is such a well-designed character that he handles the antagonist role really well. And as a secondary villain, you've got the Dragon Queen, or whatever this thing is, which is terrible and powerful. Both act as great foils to the main characters. These dragon trappers, though, they're just guys. Dumb guys. There's nothing scary, personal, or cool about them. But how about the scene itself? Once the cool lighting and mushy character designs are out of the way, the actual scene is okay. Eret, son of Eret, is a decent enough character, and the scene establishes that trappers, Drago, Bloodfist, and other dragon riders exist. It's a lot to take in all at once, and I don't think it's done super well, but it could have been worse. Hiccup and Astrid escape, and they return to Burk to tell the others. This next scene perfectly captures How to Train Your Dragon 2's best character, Stoick the Vast. Stoick is one of the greatest characters in animation history. He is the peak form of macho manliness, powerful, intimidating, and fiercely protective. As I mentioned earlier, the first movie uses him as the opposing force to Hiccup. Hiccup knows his father hates dragons, and withholds the fact that he shot down and befriended a Night Fury. Stoick finally comes around in the end, and realizes that even though his son might not be the son he was hoping for, Hiccup is a truly amazing person that Stoick loves with all of his heart. This scene from Dragons 2 exhibits Stoick perfectly. He's a chief that loves his people and loves his son, but is so excited about Hiccup's future that he seems kind of uncaring about the present. Of course, when Hiccup's warnings do finally reach Stoick's ears, he locks down the whole island without telling Hiccup exactly why. It's a bit frustrating from an audience standpoint, but it fits his character perfectly. And hey, since this is one of the last scenes on Burk, this is the perfect time to mention another pet peeve of mine. Very little time is spent on Burk in this whole film. Burk has this magical, characterized feeling that only places like Hogwarts have, and aside from a scene here or there, the Burk we know isn't even really in the movie. It's one of the strengths of the original that Dragons 2 doesn't use near enough, and then a result of not being on Burk is that a lot of the mystery from Dragons 1 is lost. In the original, you really only see a handful of islands. The dark walls of fog make it so Burk is really the only option for anyone. The horrendous dragons lie in the mist, killing anyone that leaves home. Hiccup mapping out the world beyond Burk is a great step forward for his character, but it gets rid of the oppressive, mysterious feeling the seas around Burk have. A sense of mystery is always more scary and more interesting than knowing exactly what's out there. That's more of a personal nitpick, but I think it affects the world building of this film quite a lot. The next few scenes are all pretty one note. Hiccup submits himself to the dragon trappers, and his friends and dad show up to stop him. But then we get our first look at Drago Bloodfist. This is one of the scenes that tonally separates this film from Dragons 3. How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World, or Dragons 3 because that's a mouthful and a half, is pretty tame and kind of watered down. All the characters feel blander compared to their former selves, people make choices that don't feel true to their characters, and the stakes aren't near as high as Dragons 1 or Dragons 2. The Drago Bloodfist scene showcases the stakes very well. In Stoick's story, Drago kills all of the tribe leaders with his dragon army, and Stoick was the only one to escape. So now the movie set up an interesting villain character. All we know about Drago is that he seems to be an anti-Hiccup. He can also tame and control dragons, but he uses that skill for harm instead of for good. Hiccup, being the stubborn Viking that he is still convinced he can change Drago's mind, and so he leaves Stoick again. This points to another problem with this movie. The first half is pretty redundant. Hiccup and Astrid get caught, they escape and talk to Stoick, then they run off and get caught, then they escape and talk to Stoick, then they run off again! And of course Stoick follows. It's a lot of running around, and it feels like most of the important conversations could have been consolidated into 2 scenes instead of 4, which just leads to the first part of the movie feeling kinda off. But then the next scene, in my opinion, introduces the single worst and most unnecessary element of the entire Dragon saga: Hiccup's mom. If you remember from the first movie, it was pretty clear she was dead. She was never shown and only spoken of, and that made her seem like a loving, caring, and deeply missed person. She served her narrative purpose perfectly. Dragons 2 throws that all out the window. Hiccup's mom, who we now know as Valka, is a weird, unnecessary character that abandoned her family to live with dragons. That's it. All of the mystery and fond thoughts surrounding her character were chucked away in the effort to add a twist that frankly comes out of nowhere. Yeah, there's reference to a dragon rider earlier, and Hiccup and Stoick make what feels like a tacked-on reference to Valka, but Hiccup goes from a clear, obvious objective to, wait, my mom is still alive? It's a crazy pivot, and it's not one the movie pulls off particularly well. So conceptually, Valka's character is useless and tacked on, but maybe she makes up for that in personality. There's loads of characters in movies that might not fit the plot, but still lift the movie up by just existing. Valka is not one of those. She's got about as much personality as a wet rag. Aside from being a dragon activist, tell me, what's one character tribute she has? If you list anyone else in the movie, you get instant results. Hiccup is caring, smart, and a bit goofy. Stoick is powerful, protective, and as stubborn as an ox. And Astrid is sarcastic, loving, and understanding. Valka's really just there. She laughs. Sometimes. She likes dragons. Real creative. I'm drawing a complete blank here. Unnecessary characters can still work, but only if you give them character. Valka has none. You're not being fair, I hear you saying. She's a loving and wonderful mother that just never had the chance to come back. Wrong. Listen, if she actually cared about Hiccup or Stoick, she could come back. She says she couldn't because they'd never understand, but I completely disagree. It took Stoick forever to come around to the idea that dragons aren't evil, but I think his wife coming back from the dead, flying in on a dragon, would certainly make him listen for once. It's obvious from the rest of the movie that he absolutely loves her, and getting her back would almost certainly lead to him and the rest of Burk becoming a dragon utopia years in advance. works. But maybe that's not the reason she didn't come back. Maybe she didn't come back because she feared if Stoick didn't listen, she'd have to leave the dragons and it would break her to do that. If that's the case, that's horrible. She'd abandon her family, but not the dragons. What a caring mom you've got there, Hiccup. Okay, we've roasted Hiccup's mom enough. Let's break down the scenes she's in. The first scene is already off to a rough start because they introduce her, without the audience yet knowing who it is, and then proceed to fake kill Toothless. Listen, there is a time and place for scenes where they let you think the main character could be dead, even though you know they probably aren't. But including one right here, in the middle of the movie, it makes no sense. Obviously this scene exists so that Stoick can find Hiccup's helmet later on, but they didn't need to pretend Toothless was in mortal peril. It's a scene that just doesn't work. Then we actually meet Hiccup's mom. Instead of complaining about her more, let me once again point you to the lighting! This movie has an Ice Age vibe to it, and I don't think it really works. And yes, obviously, it's cold in Burk and the surrounding area. Obviously, an ice cavern would have more of a cold color palette. Again though, I just don't think it works, and any time spent around the Alpha Dragon's ice caverns showcase this lighting technique the most. I'll also call attention to one other minor detail that annoys me so much. What are these? The original movie did such a good job of introducing the core 5 or 6 dragons, explaining their unique characteristics and why they're special, and then showing us that way more dragons exist outside the ones near Burk. The problem is, all of these cool dragons that get mentioned in the Book of Dragons, like the Thunder Drum and the Horrible Skrill, don't show up in Dragons 2. Instead, we get a bunch of new dragon designs, whose special attributes are never really explained. I'm not really concerned about the unique dragons we see the main characters ride. They're all perfect extensions of the people that get to ride each one. It's all these generic dragons I'm not the biggest fan of. They're pretty much background filler that the audience doesn't get the chance to know. Yeah, it's a minor complaint, but the first film did such a good job of characterizing each type of dragon species, and Dragons 2 falls a bit flat in that category. But enough about that. There's the scene where Stoick finds the helmet, and then we're back to the caves. The next scene establishes the Alpha Dragon as a character, and it's an interesting concept. The first movie presented a horrible dragon leader that ate and enslaved weaker dragons, but the Alpha Dragon uses those same abilities to build a thriving dragon haven. The Alpha built the colony and keeps it safe. Which just makes me ask, what purpose does Hiccup's mom serve? It's obvious she's not there to protect the dragons, she fails that bit later. Maybe just as a dragon healer? She mentions the injured dragon, so I guess she can perform the tasks that require human hands. I'm probably giving the writers too much credit because she still feels like a poorly thought out character. The Alpha's decently cool though, I like its design. Editor's note, I realized that she's obviously the dragon rider that sets other dragons free, and those dragons then go on to join the dragon colony. That kind of invalidates that whole point I just made, but oh well, moving on. Next is one of those scenes movies have where the side characters are literally doing nothing, and they finally just decide, hey, let's go be a part of the movie. It's pretty poorly done. Moving on. The side characters, which I say affectionately, these guys are amazing, then grab Mr. the Croods and run off to find Drago. The music is nice, but there's not too much to say. Speaking of the side characters, I haven't talked about them too much, but they are great. Lots of people are kind of apprehensive about the fish leg, snotlout, rough nut love triangle bits, but I think it's pretty hilarious. Definitely better than how Snotlout flirts with Hiccup's mom in Dragons 3. I think Tough Nut could have had a bit more screen time. His lines steal the show in Dragons 1 and 3, but he doesn't leave much of a mark on this film. Aerith also fits pretty decently. He's probably the best new character. Astrid is not amazing, but she does well enough. She really shines when she's bouncing off Hiccup, but she can hold her own. Then you've got the let me show you the things I thought were more important than you, Hiccup scenes where Velka shows off how the dragon colony works, how the dragons eat, etc. Visually, they're pretty cool scenes dragged down by the ever-present lighting concerns. It's decent filler with some of the best music of the whole movie, but the scene doesn't accomplish too much. Toothless is amazing as usual though. Velka and Hiccup reconnect. I still don't like her. Moving on. The side characters are back! They notice some funky bubbles, get captured, and we finally meet the main antagonist of the movie, Drago Bloodfist himself. Which leads me to what's probably my most controversial take of the whole video. I don't like Drago Bloodfist. They build him up as this terrifying, world-ending threat, but he feels more like proof of concept than a fully fledged character. Great villains have memorable lines, or incredible mind-bending strategies, or a deep and personal connection to the main characters. Drago has none of that. His voice is guttural and off-putting, but he never says anything memorable. His plans are pretty straightforward and uncomplicated. People are scared of him, but all of his power comes from the cool dragons he controls, not anything he does as a character. And as for connection to the characters, he's just kind of a bad guy they recently learned about. Sure, he killed some of Stoick's work buddies, but nobody we as the audience knew died that day. And his goal is straightforward to the point of being cliched. He just wants a dragon army. He wants power. That's about it. He just kind of does things to grow his army with no real goal or in-game plan beyond that. And his screams are kind of laughable in my mind. Again, I remember Drago being one of the best parts of the movie, but on a rewatch, he's just not that great of a character. I do like the scene where he deflects Hook Fang's fire though. I'll give him cool points for that. Drago announces it's time to defeat Burk, and the side characters remain captured. Good for them. We're back to the caves, and Stoick shows up to grab Hiccup. They run out of the caverns as Hiccup tries to explain what's going on to an oblivious Stoick, and then everything stops.
You're as beautiful as the day I lost you.
Ah, that's why the mom is in this movie. I could go on and on about why Velka doesn't fit the movie. I can break down a million reasons why they shouldn't have added her, but there is one good reason for why she exists, and it's to build Stoick up. He is such a compassionate, loving, and incredible character, and these scenes between him and Valka are some of the best in the entire movie. Yes, Valka abandoned him and her son. Yes, she's a morally messed up person with no personality, but I'm not going to deprive Stoick of these moments. They show a tender, open-hearted side of his personality the original movies never did, and that alone is enough to redeem Valka's existence for me. We cut back to the B-cast, who escape capture rather quickly. I'm not a big fan of their side plot because it feels like not much happens. They get captured, again, they escape, again, just adding to the repetitive feeling of the film. Really, these scenes exist to fully introduce Drago, give him a reason to attack Burk, and tease the bubble monster. But I feel like that could have been accomplished in at least half the time with less capturing. Like maybe one of those cut to what the villain's doing, reveal his plan scene. I don't know, I just feel like this is a lot of repetitive filler. At least the B-cast is funny. Then we get to the dance. I absolutely love this moment. The song is well written, and Stoick is a way better singer than he has any right to be. The intensity and emotion of the scene are so well delivered, even Gobber can't ruin it.
Beyond my journey.
I love this man, but he needs to learn when to shut up. The scene is the perfect calm before the storm. The best way they could have prepared the audience for what comes next. Because it's time for the big battle.
I thought I'd have to die before we'd have that dance again.
No need for drastic measures.
But how about the battle? This is pretty much the pinnacle of the movie. All of the characters are here, you've got a huge villain army versus all the good dragons, and it's a pretty decent scene. The side cast comes back for a laugh or two, and Hiccup tells the others about his mom. There's some cool shots, there are a few nice traps and invention, I love the flaming dragon wheels, and the tension is built pretty well. So far, it's a good scene. Then the bubble monster is revealed to be the bad alpha, and Valka fights Drago. I feel bad picking on Valka more, so I'll resist it. She loses. Stoick appears though, and the fight between him and Drago is electric. I've got a bit more respect for Drago now. Anyone who can go toe-to-toe with Stoick is a pretty skilled fighter. The bad alpha then kills the good alpha in a surprisingly violent scene for a kids movie, and Drago orders everyone to attack Valka. Stoick runs off to save her, and Hiccup finally faces Drago himself. I guess this scene is supposed to make Drago a sympathetic character. He shows his stump of an arm and explains how dragons took everything from him, so he controls them now to feel big and unstoppable. Again, I don't think it works well. His big villain plans and ambitions are weak, and I just don't really like this guy. And then it happens. I don't cry when watching movies. Bing Bong dying doesn't make me cry. Iron Man dying doesn't make me cry. Heck, even the opening moments of Up aren't enough to make me cry. But this scene, it gets me. Stoick the Vast, the ultimate man, a guy who can out-macho Mr. Macho, a loyal chief, and a kind and loving father, dies. Sacrifices himself for Hiccup. Dies at the hands of kind, lovable Toothless. This is the kind of scene that gives kids the need for therapy. Toothless departs, controlled by Drago as they ride off to destroy Burk. Stoick gets a proper Viking funeral in a scene that just hits home. And more importantly, this scene is the precise example of why this movie can be so darn good. The new characters mostly stink. The plot is repetitive and scattered. I can't shut up about the lighting. But at the end of the day, when this movie hits, it hits. So many scenes carry so much emotion, so much power that even Pixar probably felt ashamed. There's a handful of moments in this movie that are just so perfectly directed that I can't call it a bad follow-up to the original How to Train Your Dragon. I dislike loads about this movie, but I can't deny that it is an emotional, incredible follow-up to one of the best movies ever made. Two plot lines come to a head. Hiccup finally accepts his role as the chief of Burk, nearly completing his character arc for the movie. And Valka gets another reason for why she's in the movie. The writers knew they were going to kill Stoick, but had to leave Hiccup with a parental figure. I personally still would have cut the mom out. I think this scene would have hit so much harder if he's forced to be a fully independent adult with no one but his peers to rely on, but the writers felt like they had to give him that safety net of a parent. It's a bit of an odd choice, but whatever. Then they fly out to defeat Drago, and the film proves exactly why it's not as good as the original How to Train Your Dragon. The tone completely shifts from Stoick is dead to haha baby dragons, haha flying sheep, haha funny horn distraction noises, and it's tonal whiplash. The baby dragons were at least hinted at earlier in the movie and make sense as a travel method, but the side characters' distractions really only happen to give these guys something to do. It doesn't work, and it breaks the tone of the movie because it comes before and after some of the most emotional scenes in the entire film. Comedy can work, but it has its place, and that place is anywhere but here. Hiccup then confronts Drago and tries to break Toothless free from the mind control of the Alpha. As I mentioned earlier, their bond is fantastic, and this whole scene illustrates exactly how much Hiccup cares for Toothless and how much Toothless loves Hiccup. Their character arc throughout this movie is so strong, and the payoff here is incredible. Did you catch that? right here. The lighting changes from the cool tones back to the warm tones I love so much. Even though the ice is still everywhere, the lighting feels right. It only took the whole darn movie to get there, but hey, at least we got there. Another great payoff is the Hiccup Toothless blindfold scene. Most of this movie and the last had Hiccup and Toothless perfecting their flying, and to see their practice and Hiccup's inventions pay off is pretty great. We get another fake death scene, and then Toothless becomes the alpha? I always thought this was a little bit weird. It feels like they could have alluded to it a bit, like maybe teased it in advance, but no. He's just inherited some kind of anime hero's godlike abilities. I can't say I love this, but it's kind of cool, I guess. I don't know. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. It's cool to see all the dragons come to his side as they blast away at the bad alpha, and the side characters stand defiantly, as if they've been doing anything other than ruin the tone of the finale. Faced with an unstoppable problem, he turns to the alpha to save him, and gets disappointed. I guess this is another reason I don't like Drago much. He's nothing without his dragons. Drago dies unceremoniously in the cold waters around Burk. I suppose it's a bit poetic that the dragons he put so much faith in ended up being his demise, but I just think he was ultimately a pretty weak character. And there you have it. The dragons return. Hiccup becomes chief of Burk's icy remains, and Toothless is the king of all dragon kind. Eret the Crudes becomes a part of the Burk squad, which I honestly don't even really mind. He's not an amazing character, but he's likable enough. Add in more dragon racing as the finale, and you've got yourself a finished sequel to How to Train Your Dragon. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is such a fascinating movie. So much is done perfectly, but so many parts of it misfire that it leaves me conflicted every time I watch it. It's nowhere near as perfect as the original, but it's also not as shallow feeling as the third movie, leaving it in this weird, confusing limbo that makes it hard to review. Drago could have been much better fleshed out or given actual motives. Hiccup's mom could have had a personality or just been cut from the story. There's the bones to a perfect sequel hidden deep within this movie, but it's clouded by too much pointless running around and soul-sucking lighting. At the end of the day, though, the movie is good enough. It carries on the legacy of these characters well, even with a misstep here or there. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Please tell me in the comments. Hey, Editor Bacon here. Just wanted to thank you for making it to the end of this video. This took me absolutely forever to make. I have way more respect for long-form content creators now. I don't know how they do this. If you found me randomly on YouTube, I am a shorts channel. I post every day at 9 o'clock, just a different opinion I have on a movie or game or something random like that, and I would love to see you there. If you want to know where I got any of the music or things for this video, just check the description. I've got it all linked there. But thank you so much for watching this video. If all things go well, I'll be coming out with a few more of these in the future. But anyways, yeah, thanks again for making it to the end of this video. You don't know how much it means to me.